frat president spent 3 hours harassing me at a party, not knowing I was his boss's daughter. I showed up at my very first frat party my freshman year and immediately ran into Adam. To everyone else there, Adam was the frat president. But I knew him as the unpaid intern who'd been fetching coffee for my dad for the past 3 months, desperate to score his dream job at my dad's firm. I recognized him, but it became immediately clear that he did not remember me. "Well, hello," Adam said, looking me up and down with a smile that probably worked on most freshmen. "I'm Adam, president here. You're definitely new. I'd remember a face like yours." He stepped closer, blocking my path to the main room. "Let me get you a drink, give you the VIP tour." Not everyone gets personal attention from the president. When I politely declined and tried to move past him, his smile faltered. "Really? You're turning me down? Do you know who I am on this campus?" I escaped to the kitchen where some girls from my dorm were mixing drinks. 10 minutes late, Adam appeared again, this time less friendly. "You know, I don't usually give second chances, but I'll make an exception. You're new, you don't understand how things work here." He wedged himself between me and my friends. "These parties happen because of me. The least you could do is be friendly." When I said I was fine with my friends, he laughed. "These aren't your friends. They're just being nice because you're pathetic and they feel bad for you." My dorm mates looked uncomfortable but didn't know what to do as Adam continued. "Let me explain something about college, freshmen. Girls like you, bookish, boring, probably got in here with daddy's help. You peak at getting invited to parties like this. This is literally the best your social life will ever get, and you're wasting it by rejecting me." He turned to my friends. "You can go. She's fine with me." They hesitated but eventually drifted away, leaving me trapped against the counter. I managed to slip away to the backyard where people were playing beer pong. 20 minutes of peace ended when Adam found me talking to a guy from my economics class. "Bro, you don't want to waste your time here," Adam told him, throwing his arm around the guy's shoulders. "She's one of those girls who thinks she's saving herself for someone special. Probably has a purity ring in her dorm room." The guy looked confused, but Adam steered him away. "Trust me, I'm doing you a favor. She's the type who'd cry during her first kiss." Now I was alone by the fire pit, and Adam sat down next to me. "You're not very smart, are you? I run this social scene and I'm about to land a job at the biggest firm in the state. And you're what? Some nobody freshman who can't even dress for a party?" He touched my cardigan. "Did your mom pick this out? You look like you're going to a church potluck." I stood up to leave, but he followed me inside, grabbing my wrist when I tried to head for the door. "Where are you going?" "We're just talking." His grip was tight enough to hurt. "You know what your problem is? You think you're special. But I see 20 of you every year. Uptight freshmen who think they're too good." The party was getting more crowded and louder, making it harder to get away. Adam pulled me into a corner by the stairs, using his body to block me in. "I'm going to give you one more chance to be cool about this. Have a drink with me. Loosen up. Stop acting like I'm some creep when I'm literally the best thing at this party." When I tried to duck under his arm, he slammed his hand against the wall. "I'm talking to you. Do you know how many girls would kill to get my attention?" His frat brothers walked by and he called out to them. "Guys, look at this. The freshman virgin is too good for us." They laughed and formed a semicircle, making it impossible to leave. "She probably thinks she's going to marry some nice guy from her study group," one said. Adam nodded. "She doesn't realize nice guys don't want uptight girls who can't even handle a party. You're going to be alone forever." I finally pushed through them and ran upstairs, looking for a bathroom to lock myself in. Adam followed me, catching the door before I could close it. "Are you hiding from me? In my own house?" He pushed his way in. "You're pathetic. Crying because a guy tried to be nice to you? This is why you'll never matter to anyone. You're weak, boring, and probably only here because your daddy donated money." He grabbed my phone from my hand. "Who you gonna call? Campus security. They work for us during parties." When I started actually crying, he laughed and opened the door, shoving me out into the hallway where everyone could see. "Look everyone, it's freshman initiation time." He suddenly poured his beer over my head, the cold liquid making me gasp. "There, now you have an excuse to leave. Run home to your single dorm room and your stuffed animals." The beer ran into my eyes. Adam stood over me as I sat on the floor. "Why don't you call mommy and daddy to pick you up? I'm sure they're used to bailing out their failure of a daughter." I looked up at him through my tears and realized that was actually a great idea. I pulled out my phone, wiping beer off the screen, and dialed my dad's number, putting it on speaker. "Dad, can you pick me up? I'm at a party with Adam, your intern Adam. He just poured beer on me." Adam froze. My dad's voice came through the speaker loud and clear, asking if I needed him to come get me right now. The whole hallway went dead quiet as everyone heard him say Adam's name and call him his intern. Adam's face turned white as a sheet while he stared at my phone like it might bite him. I told Dad yes, please come get me, and asked him to stay on the phone until he got here. My voice was shaky, but I made sure everyone could hear me clearly. Adam started backing away from me, his mouth opening and closing but no words coming out. The crowd in the hallway started whispering and pulling out their phones to record what was happening. People were pointing at Adam and I could hear someone say his career was over before it even started. Adam's frat brothers looked totally confused about why their president suddenly looked so scared. Charlotte pushed through the crowd and rushed over to me, helping me stand up from the floor. She took one look at my beer-soaked clothes and saw the red marks on my wrist where Adam had grabbed me. Without saying anything, she stepped right between me and Adam, blocking him from getting any closer. Dad's voice came through the phone saying he was already in the car and would be there in 15 minutes. He asked if campus security was there, and when I said no, He told me he was calling them himself while driving. I could hear him dialing on another phone in the background. Adam finally found his voice and started moving toward me, saying we should talk about this privately and work things out. Charlotte told him to back off in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear. More students moved in around us, forming a protective wall between Adam and me. Someone in the crowd shouted that Adam's career at the firm was definitely over now. Two of Adam's frat brothers grabbed his arms and tried to pull him away, telling him he needed to leave before this got worse. But Adam just stood there frozen, staring at me like he was watching his whole future fall apart. One of his brothers asked what was happening and why Adam looked so scared, but Adam couldn't even answer him. The guy just kept staring at me with his mouth hanging open. Within minutes, I heard heavy footsteps on the stairs and Sean from campus security appeared in the hallway. Dad must have given them the exact address because Sean came straight to me. He looked at my wet clothes and immediately asked if I needed medical attention for my wrist. I showed him the red marks and he took photos with his phone while asking if Adam had done this. I nodded and kept the phone on speaker so Dad could hear everything that was happening. I started telling Sean about the 3 hours of harassment, making sure he wrote down every single detail. How Adam had followed me around the party, blocked my path, grabbed my wrist, and then poured beer on me. Adam tried to interrupt and give his version of events, but Sean held up his hand and told him to wait his turn. More campus security officers arrived along with 2 campus police officers who started taking statements from people in the hallway. Several students came forward right away to say they saw Adam pour the beer on me. A girl from my dorm told them she heard Adam calling me pathetic and saying horrible things. One guy said he saw Adam grab my wrist when I tried to leave earlier. The officers were writing everything down while Adam stood there looking smaller and smaller. His frat brothers had all disappeared by now, not wanting to be connected to whatever was about to happen to him. Charlotte stayed right next to me the whole time, holding my hand while I talked to the officers. Dad stayed on the phone, occasionally asking questions to make sure I was okay, and that the officers were doing their job. I could hear his car engine and knew he was driving fast to get to me. The campus police officer asked if I wanted to file a formal complaint and press charges for assault. Before I could answer, Dad's voice came through the speaker, telling me not to make any decisions until he got there. Adam's eyes got even wider when he heard that, probably realizing this wasn't going to just go away. The officer gave me a card with an incident number and said we could decide about charges later. Sean asked Adam for his ID and started writing up his own report about what he'd observed. Adam's hands were shaking as he pulled out his wallet. More and more students were gathering in the hallway, and I could see several people posting on social media already. Someone said the frat president assaulting a freshman was going to be all over campus by morning. Adam kept looking at me like he wanted to say something, but the officers told him to stay quiet. They separated us, moving Adam down the hall while I stayed with Charlotte and Sean. I could still feel the beer dripping from my hair, and my wrist was starting to throb where he'd grabbed it. Charlotte found some paper towels from the bathroom and helped me clean my face while we waited for Dad. The whole hallway smelled like beer, and I just wanted to get out of there and take a shower. Finally, I heard Dad's voice in person as he came up the stairs, and I'd never been so happy to see him. Dad's face was a kind of mad I'd never seen before, his jaw tight as he took in my beer-soaked hair and the way I was sitting on the floor. He helped me stand up and checked my wrist where Adam had grabbed me, the skin already turning purple. The campus police officers were asking everyone to stay put while they took statements, and Dad told them in this calm but scary voice that he was Adam's employer at his law firm. Adam's whole body went stiff when Dad said that Adam's internship was terminated immediately. No discussion needed. The color drained from Adam's face and he started babbling about how this was all a big misunderstanding, how he didn't know who I was, how he was just joking around. Dad turned to him and said harassment was wrong no matter who the victim was, and the fact that Adam thought it would have been okay if I wasn't his daughter made it worse. The officers started taking photos of my bruised wrist and my beer-soaked clothes, asking if I wanted to press charges for assault. I told them I needed time to think about it and they handed me a card with an incident number written on it. Charlotte was gathering my purse and cardigan from where I'd dropped them, while 2 officers took Adam aside to question him about grabbing my wrist and pouring beer on me. His frat brothers had all vanished, probably not wanting to be connected to whatever was about to happen to their president. Dad kept his hand on my shoulder while we walked down the stairs and out to his car, Charlotte following us and saying she'd drive behind us to make sure we got home safe. The second I got in Dad's car and the door closed, everything hit me at once and I started sobbing, my whole body shaking from what had just happened. Dad reached over and squeezed my hand, telling me none of this was my fault, and that Adam would face every single consequence coming to him. We pulled into our driveway and Charlotte parked behind us, following us inside where I went straight to the bathroom for a shower. I stood under the hot water for what felt like forever, trying to wash the smell of beer out of my hair while I could hear Charlotte in the kitchen making tea. Through the bathroom door, I could hear Dad on the phone with someone named Wyatt Tanner, who I knew was the managing partner at his firm. Dad was explaining what had happened at the party and formally requesting that Adam's internship be terminated immediately with no chance of future employment. After my shower, I put on pajamas and found Charlotte waiting in my room with the tea and some cookies she'd found in the pantry. She stayed the night and we spent hours documenting everything, taking more photos of my wrist, which was now dark purple, saving all the texts I'd sent her during the party when I was trying to get away from Adam. We wrote down a timeline of everything that had happened, from when Adam first approached me to when Dad arrived. Charlotte mentioned she knew at least 2 other girls who Adam had cornered at parties, girls who might be willing to talk about their experiences too. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing with dozens of messages from people who were at the party. Some were asking if I was okay, others just wanted details about what happened, and a few were angry that the frat might get in trouble because of me. Charlotte helped me delete most of them without reading, only responding to my actual friends who were genuinely worried about me. Dad had taken the day off work and was in the kitchen making pancakes when we came downstairs, acting like this was totally normal even though he never cooked. While we ate, he explained my options in this really calm way, saying I could press criminal charges, file a complaint with the university, or do both. He kept saying it was completely my choice and he'd support whatever I decided, but I could tell he wanted Adam to face real consequences. The phone rang while we were cleaning up, and it was Wyatt Tanner calling to confirm that Adam's internship had been terminated that morning. He also mentioned that Adam had already been on thin ice because several female staff members had complained about him making them uncomfortable, asking for their numbers and standing too close during meetings. Wyatt said Adam was now banned from the firm's property, and his keycard had been deactivated, and if he tried to come to the building, security would remove him. Dad thanked him and hung up, then looked at me and asked what I wanted to do next. 3 days later, I told Dad I wanted to report everything to the university, and he drove Charlotte and me to campus for the Title IX appointment he'd already scheduled. The office was in the admin building's 3rd floor, and Layla Garcia was waiting with a stack of forms and pamphlets spread across her desk. She had me go through everything that happened at the party while she typed notes on her computer, asking specific questions about times and witnesses and whether I had any evidence. Charlotte showed her the texts I'd sent during the party, and the photos of my bruised wrist, and Layla printed everything for the file. She explained how the investigation would work, that they'd interview Adam and any witnesses we could name, and that the process usually took about 60 days but could be longer. She handed me a no-contact order that she'd already filled out, saying Adam couldn't approach me anywhere on campus, couldn't text or call or email me, and if he violated it, he'd face immediate suspension. The order went into effect that day, and campus security would be notified within the hour. We spent 2 hours in her office going through my rights as a complainant, the possible outcomes ranging from warnings to expulsion, and how I could have a support person at any meetings. By the time we left, I had a folder full of resources and Layla's direct number programmed in my phone. Word spread across campus faster than I expected, and by Monday morning, everyone seemed to know what had happened at the party. Walking into the dining hall for breakfast, I could feel people staring and heard whispers following me to the cereal station. Charlotte stayed right next to me, shooting looks at anyone who stared too long, and we found a corner table where we could eat without feeling like we were on display. Some people I'd never talked to before came up to say they were sorry about what happened, while others just pointed and whispered to their friends. In my psych lecture that afternoon, people kept turning around to look at me, and the professor had to ask everyone to face forward twice. Between classes, I got an email notification from an address I didn't recognize, and Dad called me immediately to say Adam's lawyer had sent something, but our lawyer would handle it so I didn't need to read it. He said it was Adam trying to apologize and asking me not to pursue charges because it would ruin his future, which Dad called manipulative garbage that we'd add to our evidence file. The lawyer had already drafted a cease and desist response reminding Adam about the no-contact order. That same week, 3 different girls messaged me on Instagram saying they'd had similar experiences with Adam at other parties. One sophomore described how he'd cornered her in the basement during homecoming weekend. Another freshman said he'd grabbed her at a mixer and wouldn't let go until her boyfriend showed up, and a junior told me about Adam following her to her car after she rejected him at a party last year. We met at the campus coffee shop, and they agreed to talk to Layla together, so I set up another appointment and we all went to the Title IX office. Layla took each of their statements separately, while the rest of us waited in the lobby, and when she came out after the last interview, she said this established a clear pattern of predatory behavior that would strengthen the investigation. The frat got pulled into an emergency review by Greek Life 2 days after the other girls came forward, and they had to suspend all social events while the investigation was happening. This made a lot of the brothers angry, and some of them started posting on social media about how one person was ruining their whole semester, though they didn't use my name directly. Charlotte screenshot everything before they could delete it, adding it to our growing evidence folder. I started having nightmares about the party and couldn't focus during lectures, so Charlotte walked me to the counseling center and waited while I had my first appointment with Gabriela Diaz. Gabriela had me describe what happened and then explained that freezing when Adam grabbed me was a completely normal trauma response, that my brain was trying to protect me by shutting down instead of fighting. She taught me some breathing exercises for when I felt anxious, and scheduled me for weekly sessions to work through everything. 2 weeks after I filed the report, Layla called to say the panel had reached a decision after reviewing all the evidence and witness statements. Adam was found responsible for assault, harassment, and creating a hostile environment, and the panel voted to suspend him for 2 years, with a permanent ban from campus property. The decision would be on his transcript if he tried to transfer, and he had 10 days to appeal. His parents hired some expensive lawyer from the city to fight the suspension, but Layla said with 4 victims giving consistent statements and multiple witnesses from the party, the appeal probably wouldn't change anything. The lawyer apparently told Adam's parents to accept the punishment and focus on damage control instead of making things worse with a long appeal. My professors had been notified about the situation through the Dean of Students' office, and worked with me on extensions for papers and moving my economics discussion section to a different time, so I wouldn't have to see Adam's empty seat 3 times a week. 3 days later, the district attorney's office called my cell while I was eating lunch with Charlotte in the dining hall. The prosecutor said they'd reviewed the police report and witness statements and wanted to meet about pressing assault and battery charges against Adam. I set up an appointment for the next afternoon and brought Dad and Gabriela with me to the courthouse downtown. The prosecutor laid out photos of my bruised wrist on her desk and explained that with multiple witnesses and the beer assault on video from someone's phone, they had a strong case. She said Adam could face up to a year in jail if convicted, but would probably get probation as a first offense. I signed the paperwork to move forward with charges while Dad squeezed my shoulder. Meanwhile, Charlotte had been busy organizing what she called my protection squad, recruiting 8 girls from our dorm who started walking with me to every class. They'd show up at my door each morning and we'd move across campus as a group, making me feel safe for the first time since the party. At meals, they surrounded me at our usual table, creating a buffer zone from stares and whispers. One of them even started sitting next to me in my big lecture classes, taking notes when my hands shook too much to write. The arrest happened on a Tuesday morning when Adam showed up at his parents' house for spring break. Police knocked on the door at 7 a.m. with a warrant and took him to the station in handcuffs while neighbors watched from their driveways. His mugshot appeared on the local news website by noon, showing him in an orange jumpsuit with dark circles under his eyes. He posted bail that afternoon, but the judge set strict conditions, including staying 500 feet from campus and having zero contact with me directly or through third parties. The frat house got shut down 2 weeks after his arrest, when the Greek life investigation found evidence of hazing, underage drinking, and multiple unreported assault incidents over 3 years. The national chapter pulled their charter immediately, and the university gave the brothers 30 days to move out. Adam's name appeared in every article as the president who destroyed a 90-year-old fraternity through his actions. Some of his former brothers started reaching out through Instagram and email to apologize for not stopping him that night. One guy met me at the library and admitted they all knew Adam got aggressive with girls when he drank, but nobody wanted to challenge him because he controlled their social lives. Another sent a long message about how watching Adam pour beer on me made him realize he'd been a coward for 3 years. Dad called an emergency meeting at his firm the Monday after Adam's arrest, and implemented new policies for all interns and employees. Background checks became mandatory, including social media reviews and reference calls to previous employers. He also brought in consultants to run harassment training sessions that everyone had to attend, even the senior partners. He told me later that Adam had taught him an expensive lesson about the importance of really knowing who you're bringing into your company. The preliminary hearing happened 6 weeks after I pressed charges, in a small courtroom downtown with wood paneling and uncomfortable benches. Adam's lawyer tried to paint the whole thing as typical college behavior that got blown out of proportion. He kept using phrases like youthful mistake and party atmosphere while I sat there with Charlotte holding my hand. The judge, a woman in her 60s with gray hair pulled back tight, looked at the photos of my wrist and watched the video of the beer assault twice. She said she'd seen plenty of college parties in her career, and none of them gave anyone the right to physically restrain and humiliate another person. When spring semester started, Charlotte and I moved to a different dorm on the opposite side of campus from the old frat house. Our new hallmates had heard about what happened and immediately adopted us into their group. They had a whole system of checking in on each other through a group chat, and nobody went to parties alone. Our RA was a senior who'd been through something similar her freshman year, and she made our floor a safe space where we could talk about anything. 3 months after the arrest, Adam's lawyer contacted mine about a plea deal to avoid trial. He'd plead guilty to misdemeanor assault in exchange for 2 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and mandatory counseling for anger management. He also had to pay all my medical bills from the wrist injury and therapy sessions, which came to almost $8,000. The judge approved the deal, and I didn't have to testify at trial, which Gabriella said would help my healing process. The university used our case as a catalyst for major changes to Greek life policies and training requirements. They created something called the Party Safety Initiative that all Greek organizations had to participate in before hosting any social events. It covered consent, bystander intervention, and the consequences of harassment with real examples from recent cases. They asked if they could use my story anonymously in the training materials, and I agreed because maybe it would stop another Adam from thinking he could get away with it. Charlotte started dragging me to small gatherings in our new dorm, just 5 or 6 people watching movies in the common room at first. She'd sit next to me the whole time, and we had this system where I'd tap her knee twice if I needed to leave. The first party we went to after everything was a birthday thing for someone on our floor, and Charlotte brought 3 other girls from our hallway with us. We all stayed together near the kitchen, and when some guy I didn't know tried to corner me by the drinks, Charlotte appeared out of nowhere and pulled me away to look at something on her phone. Our whole friend group had code words now. Like if anyone texted pizza in the group chat, it meant come get me immediately. I went to therapy every Tuesday at the campus health center, and Gabriella had this way of making me talk through everything without feeling like I was analyzed. 6 months after the party, I could finally sleep through the night without waking up in a panic. Gabriella showed me my intake forms from when I first started, and the difference was shocking. All those symptoms I'd marked as severe were now mild or gone completely. She said speaking up about what happened had helped more than years of therapy might have otherwise, because I'd taken back control. I found out about Adam through the campus rumor mill when someone mentioned seeing his name on a transfer request at the registrar's office. Charlotte's friend who worked in admissions said he'd applied to 3 other schools in state, but they'd all rejected him after checking his disciplinary record. His LinkedIn disappeared one day, and this guy from his old frat told me at the coffee shop that Adam was working at some electronics store near his parents' house. The same guy said Adam had tried to finish his degree online through some sketchy program that barely counted as accredited. Dad started calling me every Sunday night to check in. Real conversations, not just the quick house school talks we used to have. He'd ask about my classes and friends, but also about how I was handling everything, if I felt safe on campus, if I needed anything. He came to visit more often too, taking me and Charlotte out to dinner and always making sure I knew he was proud of how I'd handled everything. When he saw guys looking at me the wrong way at restaurants, he'd get this protective look, but he never said anything unless I brought it up first. The university gave Charlotte some award at the end-of-year ceremony for being an outstanding bystander and advocate. She had to go up on stage in front of everyone, and the dean talked about how her actions had made a real difference in a serious situation. Charlotte just laughed about it later and said she was just being a decent human. But I knew how much she'd done for me those months. I switched my major to pre-law after sitting in on one of Layla's presentations about victim advocacy and realizing that's what I wanted to do with my life. My grades went from barely passing to dean's list because I actually cared about what I was studying now. The professors in the legal studies department were mostly former prosecutors and defense attorneys who had real stories about helping people navigate the system. They'd use examples from actual cases, and I'd sit there taking notes thinking about how I could help someone going through what I went through. The old frat house sat empty for months after they shut it down, until the university announced they were converting it into a women's resource center. They gutted the whole place and rebuilt it with meeting rooms, a library, counseling offices, and safe study spaces. At the opening ceremony, they asked me to say a few words, and I just talked for maybe 2 minutes about how important it was to have spaces where women felt protected and supported. Standing in that same building where everything had happened, but seeing it transformed into something positive felt like the universe balancing itself out somehow. This guy who'd been one of Adam's frat brothers came up to me outside the library one day looking really uncomfortable. He said that testifying at Adam's hearing had made him realize how messed up his own behavior had been at parties, and with girls in general. He'd started going to counseling and was volunteering with the campus prevention program, teaching other guys about consent and respect. He thanked me for speaking up because it had opened his eyes to things he'd been ignoring or participating in without thinking. There was this guy in my study group for constitutional law who always saved me a seat and brought extra highlighters because I always forgot mine. He never pushed or made things weird, just was consistently kind and patient even when I flinched at sudden movements or needed to sit near the door. Charlotte met him for coffee 3 times before declaring he passed her test, and when he finally asked me to get dinner off campus, I actually said yes. We went to this Thai place and talked about law school applications, and he didn't try to kiss me or even hold my hand, just walked me back to my dorm and said he had a great time. Charlotte was waiting in my room, and when I told her about the date, she said it was the first time she'd seen me really smile in months. Layla called me into her office one afternoon to ask if she could use my case as an example in training materials for new Title IX coordinators at other schools. She said the way everything had been documented and handled could show others how to properly support survivors and take swift action. She promised to remove identifying details, but wanted to include the timeline and the coordination between different offices. I signed the permission forms feeling like maybe something good could come from all of this if it helped even one other person get the support they needed. 3 weeks later, a thick envelope arrived from a law firm I didn't recognize. And when I opened it, there was a letter from Adam's parents saying they'd been blind to their son's behavior patterns and were establishing a fund for campus assault prevention programs. The check attached was for $50,000 made out to the university's new safety initiative, and they asked that I be informed but not contacted further about it. Charlotte was sitting next to me when I read it, and she grabbed the letter to read it herself, then said they were probably trying to avoid a civil lawsuit, but at least the money would help other students. That same afternoon, Layla called to tell me about a summer internship opportunity at a firm that specialized in victim advocacy and campus assault cases, and asked if I wanted her to recommend me. I filled out the application that night, and 2 weeks later got an interview where the partners asked about my experience and how I'd want to help other survivors navigate the legal system. They offered me the position on the spot and said they'd been following my case and were impressed with how I'd handled everything. Charlotte and I started looking at apartments for junior year, and we made a list of requirements that included deadbolts, security cameras, first-floor windows with locks, and a building with controlled access. We spent 3 weekends driving around looking at places, and each time we'd test the locks, check the sightlines from the street, and ask about the other tenants. The landlord at one place laughed when Charlotte asked about the response time for police calls, but we just crossed it off our list and kept looking. We finally found a place 6 blocks from campus with everything we wanted, plus a doorman who worked nights and remembered everyone who came and went. The lease signing felt like a big step toward normal life, and we celebrated with ice cream even though it was just a regular Tuesday. 2 days before the semester ended, I got an email from the university president's office saying I'd been selected for the Courage Award at the closing ceremony. Standing at that podium in front of hundreds of people, I kept it short and just said that courage wasn't about not being scared, but about speaking up even when you were terrified. My hands shook the whole time, but I made it through, and when I sat down, Charlotte was crying, and my dad was recording everything on his phone. The last day in my dorm room, I was packing boxes when I found that cardigan shoved in the back of my closet, still in the dry cleaning bag from when Charlotte had taken it to get cleaned months ago. I held it for a minute, remembering that scared girl who thought a cardigan would keep her safe at a party, then folded it carefully and put it in the donation pile. Charlotte helped me carry the boxes down to my dad's car, and as we loaded everything, I looked back at the dorm where everything had started and felt ready to move forward. The donation center was on our way home, and when I handed over the bag with the cardigan, the volunteer smiled and said it would make someone very happy. Thanks for sticking with me through all my questions and wonderings. It's always so interesting exploring this stuff together. Until we meet again, take care. Subscribe for more content like this.